The Syrian government has met its first deadline in the agreement to destroy its chemical weapons stockpile. On Friday, it sent a watchdog agency an initial accounting of its arsenal. And U.S. officials say they are pleasantly surprised by the completeness of the Syrian inventory, declaring it better than expected. Joining us now, former UN inspector Charles Delfer, who led the search for weapons of mass destruction in Iraq after the 2003 invasion. Mr. Delfer, what do you make of the prompt response from the Assad regime, and what do you make of the positive reaction from the Obama administration?
Well, so far, so good. We've come in just 2 weeks. Military strike, albeit limited, to address the problem of Syrian chemical weapons. It looks as though the Russians have really moved the ball forward on this. A week ago, Lavrov, the foreign minister, made a proposal to disarm the chemical weapons by arms control, by inspections. He's the only person who probably could have done that because he knows the Syrians, and he spent 5 years at the UN during the thick of the Iraqi problems. He knows the disarmament process. So far, so good. I would also point out that the Russians appear to be keeping the Syrian feet to the fire on this.
Let me pick up on that, though, because Assad has a long history of delay and, quite frankly, of lying. The Russians have been known sometimes to delay on those kinds of issues. Given Assad, given the Russians, how confident are you that we can meet this rather ambitious timetable to destroy Syria's chemical weapons stockpile, the entire stockpile, by the middle of next year?
Well, Chris, there's a few points that argue in favor of that being possible. One, look, the Syrians have had chemical weapons for decades, so my guess is that they have some capacity on their own to destroy old and aging munitions. Secondly, there's going to be a lot of international support for this. My guess is that not all of the work will be done inside Syria, but some of it will be taken outside of Syria. The other point I would make is that Syria probably has a lot of experience in moving these things around. They can be consolidated pretty quickly, perhaps at locations near the shore so they can be moved off by ship. I'm relatively optimistic that this narrow objective in a very complicated situation in Syria, but the narrow objective of getting rid of the chemical weapons is a case where Russian and American interests are congruent.
Let me put a cautionary note on all that, though. In the days after the August 21st chemical weapons attack, there were, the U.S. was talking about a military strike. There were all kinds of reports that the Syrian military was dispersing its chemical weapons, moving it out of the known areas, the arsenals, to places where they would be sheltered. One, doesn't that make it a whole lot harder to actually find where these weapons are? And two, what about the possibility that Assad could simply ship some of his chemical weapons to allies in the region?
Well, this is obviously a question that the inspectors will have to look at. Practically speaking, the hardest part at this stage is getting the bureaucracies right. There's a bureaucracy in The Hague which is set up to implement the Chemical Weapons Treaty Convention. There's also the bureaucracy in the UN in New York, the Security Council. Over the course of the next week, they're going to have to sort this out. It'll be key to watch for who is going to be the person to head this. When you see that person named and identified, you'll get a better idea of whether this is going to move forward smartly. Obviously, they have to worry about Syrian cheating. But the Russians are going to be embarrassed and hurt in addition if Bashar al-Assad is caught blatantly cheating in this case.
Mr. Delfer, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much for coming in today and giving us your perspective on all this.